Hey everybody, this is day 2 of 21 days of prayer and fasting. Thanks for joining us on this prayer and fasting journey with Mount Paran North. And today we're going to look at a very famous passage of scripture, Matthew chapter 6, verses 7 through 13, the Lord's Prayer. Verse 7, "And when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. Pray then like this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." I grew up a Southern Pentecostal, and you may or may not know what that means, but let's just say that I've heard every kind of prayer that could be prayed loudly in a corporate setting. I grew up hearing many kinds of prayers, from shouts to whispers to groans and words that could not be uttered. I've heard it all. And as I was a child learning to pray, of course, I imitated those prayers. I mean, that's what we do. We go by the example that we've been given. But as I began to grow older and became a teenager, and even into my early college years, I realized that I hadn't actually developed my own prayer voice. I was just imitating the prayers of others, even using their own phrases and words, and began to realize that I needed to just talk to God instead of trying to copy somebody else. And really, that's what I began to do. I began to just have a conversation with the Lord, and my prayers took a very different tone. And I think that's what Jesus is talking about here in the Lord's Prayer and in the verses that lead up to it. I think He's trying to teach us first that our prayers don't have to be fancy. Like He was saying about the Gentiles and their long phrases and empty phrases. Our prayers don't have to be fancy. They don't have to be a copy even of what somebody else is saying. Second, I believe the Lord's teaching us that our prayers should be sincere. In verse 8, He tells us that God already knows what we need before we ask it anyway. He knows what's in our hearts. There's no need for us to put on a show or try to impress God, because He already knows exactly what we need before we even ask it. And third, I believe that the Lord is trying to teach us to follow His pattern for prayer. Like in verse 9, He says, start with worship. Focus on God's greatness. In verse 10, He says that we should humbly submit to His will. Verses 11 and 12, He tells us to ask for what we need, including forgiveness, not just daily bread or the physical things that we need, but also forgiveness of our debts and our trespasses and sins. And in verse 13, He asks us to ask Him to lead us and to protect us and to guide us in everything that we do and everywhere that we go. So today, as you pray on day 2 of 21 days of prayer and fasting, I encourage you to pray like Jesus prayed. Your prayers don't have to be fancy. They should be sincere and from the heart, and they can and should follow the pattern that the Lord set out for us. I love you, North. Thanks for joining us on this journey. I'm praying for you as you pray and fast, and I believe God's going to be attentive to our prayers. He's going to respond as we humbly seek Him. God bless.